Hey guys, welcome to a brand new episode of Banking Bills and Bevs. You're joined by myself, Mr. Moneyjar, at Taps Will Billingsley, and today we are joined by a very special guest, Olly Betts of OpenWrks. How are you doing, Olly?
I'm great, thanks guys. Yeah, good to be on with you guys. Doing well, thanks.
Thanks very much for joining us. And today we're going to be talking about the future of open data.
Just kind of laying the foundations, really, what's been and what's to come. I think Ollie's got some great perspectives. It'd be great if you could start by kind of giving us a little bit of background as to who you are.
Yeah, sure. So for me, it was a bit of a journey. I've been sort of 15 or so years in fintech now. I joined a startup in 2004 where we used data to help banks engage with customers who had missed payments. So that world used to be very entirely telephony based and sending people letters. And we used data to triage, segment, customer profile, people to decide which channel to engage people through and start to unlock digital engagement for purposes of helping people repay. But that business got me very close to credit data at the time. So the data that's held by the credit bureaus about your spending on credit agreements, any credit agreements you default on. And we actually did a lot of fairly transformational work with how you could profile and segment people based on credit history, credit score, trend of credit score, trend of repayment. Out of that though, kind of I always was interested in just how transformational you could make processes and what efficiency gains you could get with a data set that was interesting, but still pretty static, typically 2 months out of date, often wrong, not very granular. So at best kind of account balance and maybe balance movement month to month. And so, yeah, so pre-open banking days, kind of just where you're dealing with credit data. And then really at the start of OpenWrks was wanting to use richer data to better understand consumers, with a view that the better you can understand a consumer, the better products you can build for them. Yeah. That was the kind of inception of OpenWrks. And then we actually did a couple of years without open banking being sort of a piece of legislation in the UK, looking for data sources. We did a lot of experimentation with Twitter APIs and Facebook APIs to try and kind of predict spending behavior and different patterns like that. And then sort of open banking started to happen, or generally PSD2, but open banking in the UK. And so yeah, in 2017, we built our sort of platform to enable us to consume that data. In 2018, was one of the first companies to be authorized to access that data. And from there, I've then sort of really just been very focused around how can you use this information to create better financial service experiences for consumers.
Nice. You've kind of checked off my first couple of questions. Yeah, kind of more around what inspired you to get involved in the space. Kind of what's the mission really then behind OpenWrks?
Yeah, I think that the high level mission from my perspective is that financial services aren't particularly fair. Mm-hmm. So as a concept, financial services aren't fair for consumers. I don't mean that they're non-inclusive or that people are excluded from financial services, but more that I think to get the most out of financial services and the most out of your money, you sort of have to have some pretty above base level knowledge of how the system works, kind of how money moves, how to apply for things, how banks consider your credit applications, how banks engage with you if you miss payments, all of those types of things. And so the kind of vision for this was, well, a way to make things fairer, which I think for me is kind of easier for people to interact with, is all comes back to understanding the circumstances of the individual and their household. If you can get a really good understanding of that, then their access to financial products that can help them now and in the future becomes easier, becomes broader, and kind of the ultimate goal then is you can sort of understand more about individuals to provide more relevant product, but also you can help those individuals understand more about themselves and their circumstances so they pick the right product.
Could I just rewind a bit to where you say that financial services aren't fair? Could you give an example of how you think that plays out? Because I think that's a sentiment that a lot of people would agree with.
Yeah, I think one of the areas, so that's a very broad statement that you probably picked up on. For us, to give you a really practical example of something we use open banking for, we focus a lot of our energy on people who do struggle slightly financially or struggle a lot financially. So people on low incomes or volatile incomes. How the market works today, if you miss payments on a credit card or a loan and you fall into a position of debt, then you can negotiate with your creditors, with the banks or finance providers to repay on slightly different terms. So say, I can't afford the contractual amount, I need longer. I'll pay you back over 10 years and I'll pay you a smaller amount each month. That's good, that's possible. Regulation protects you and enables you to do that. But the banks today, and exclusively the market, requires you to pay a fixed monthly amount to do that. So why is that not fair? Well, the reason for the vast majority of people that they fell into debt in the first place is not deliberately, it's not malicious, it's not actually even poor money management, it's volatile income and unexpected expenditure. So it's shocks you can't plan for, they catch you out, it's life. What we can do with open banking to make things fairer is enable people to pay a flexible amount each month based on what they've got left in their bank account or what they can afford after they've fed the kids, kept a roof over their heads and done all of those essential things you need to do. And so I guess that's an example of where I'm not talking about fairness necessarily in the banks charge too much or exclude certain segments of the population. It's more about there's antiquated ways in which financial services work that are due to almost historical process and maybe the ways things have always been done, if you like, but with technology are possible to change for the better of the consumer, so they're more protected, but also for everyone, which is in that example, if I can help someone pay what they can afford, they're much more likely to pay. And in the alternative, if they can't meet the £100 fixed amount they owe, they might pay nothing, which actually for the banks means they get less return. All the cost of engaging that customer again, we can make all of that go away just by doing something which makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I remember at the start of the year, a lot of banks they moved away from daily standing charges on overdrafts to single APR. But when you think about how kind of unbespoke, if that's a word, a single 39.9% APR is for millions of people, your take of having, variable payments makes a lot more sense and helps people a lot more.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely true. I mean, overdrafts are a massive issue where, again, around fairness, I'm not sure it's, again, necessarily, I'm not talking about, like you, about sort of unfairness about the fees charged, but yeah, it's kind of fairness linked to personalisation again, which is, all the data is available, the understanding is possible. Let's look at ways to be more flexible back to people's circumstances and reality. This whole sort of financial services are very fixed, and I know there's a reason for that from a regulatory perspective, and to an extent there's been historically a reason for that from a sort of pricing and margin perspective for banks. More personalization, less margin, arguably kind of less cookie cutter, but the data's there and the technology is possible now that they can create the same margin, if not more margin, but the customer gets a much better service.
Like some sort of bill switching tool.
Yeah,
someone should build that. Someone should make that.
Someone should build a way to flexibly repay on every product, and someone should build a way to switch if someone doesn't offer flexible payments. Right?
Yeah,
that sounds like a good idea.
Well, I think we're getting into some use cases here. Just to peel back, there's a little bit of what have you done to date? What does that mean for the average Joe, tapping into my bank account from an OpenWrks perspective, right? Are you facilitating? I know you're doing AIS, BIS. So where are you at now? What does that mean, right? If we're trying to help people wrap their heads around it a little bit, and then
yeah. So we're somewhat invisible to end users because we kind of provide a technology layer. So end users do sort of interact with our product, but typically through their relationship with a bank or a provider. So to give you some other use cases, we've do a lot of work with banks around assessing people's affordability, either when they're applying for credit or where they are in a situation where they can't afford to repay the consumer would experience that in a way that what previously they would have had to do if their bank asked them to demonstrate their affordability would be call up the bank, spend half an hour to an hour on the phone talking through their income and all their spending. We can automate that using open banking into a few clicks. And we do that through a brand called Tully. Well, with Tully, what we can do with open banking is you're in debt, you're struggling to repay. We can get you on these flexible repayments, and we can obviously help you understand how fast you could service your debt, repay, get debt free. Mm-hmm. What's an obvious extension of that is, why shouldn't people who are repaying debt and struggling financially not be able to see what they could save for the future? So could we use those APIs to kind of a lot of these people forego on pension contributions.
Yeah, that's going to be, yeah.
And it's like, it's for me, sort of the importance of saving for the future. Now, the regulations and legislation quite rightly allows someone to make savings whilst they're repaying debt. So there's an allowable amount per month that even if you've accrued a lot of debt and you need to pay that as a priority, you should, and you do have a protection to save. But helping customers understand, maybe there's ways to repay a more expensive debt faster to save more. That interplay with the future of your finances, which I think is becoming so much more important with an aging population, probably entering another period of austerity where the first thing to do is cancel your pension contribution, maybe not have money for savings. So that sort of open finance excites me. And then we're working a lot on that. I think open data beyond that. I think for you guys in the kind of switching area gets interesting on, where we're still focused on is where are you spending your money, but not necessarily how much of stuff are you consuming. Yeah. Stuff like broadband, energy and things like that. That kind of open data thing is sort of when you can start to look at consumption and value, that goes to another level of kind of how personalized the solution can get for the consumer, give them complete visibility of the information being used, helping them understand a bit more about their affordability, sharing that with the bank, and getting to a decision or an outcome faster. So that's kind of another example. I guess through our AIS capability and our aggregation, there's other kind of product providers out there which are much more kind of consumer-driven use cases. So Snoop's one of our clients, relatively new to market, but looking again at potentially switching of services, but looking at based on your spending, where you spend your money, tips to save, kind of daily tips on ways to save money with different behaviors or with loyalty discounts and things like that. So they're one of our kind of clients. And then it's going up into the enterprise, kind of a bit more Xero. The online accounting provider use our aggregation layer to enable slightly different use case, but a small business when they check, small businesses, especially now in these circumstances, want to check their balance multiple times a day. We enable Xero to enable a small business to see their P&L of their business and their sales and their invoices alongside the cash at bank balance and whether they've received payments in real time.
We're about the time.
Yeah.
Timmy, if you have a question or wrap us up. I think my last would be just if you have any cool startups that you'd like to shine some light.
Same here. Yeah. Anyone you want to shout out?
Yeah, I should kind of like shout out all OpenWrks clients, and I won't remember them all. I think I've hit my quota of saying AppTap a lot.
Yeah.
There's other people. Snoop I've mentioned. There's Tuco, recently renamed from Toucan, and Bailey there, who we power their application, which is helping carers get visibility of the person they care for, bank accounts to help them mitigate the risk of fraud and being susceptible to fraud while they're vulnerable. All of those things that are thinking about sort of, again, specific segments of people or consumers or circumstances where people, it could be made easier for people. But there's so many, that's what's so exciting about being in this space. I've forgotten a load. I'll apologize later, but there's so many great ideas at the moment, and people really thinking about how to help the end user and create value. So I think 2 years ago when open banking started, a bit too much talk about the infrastructure and not enough about how it's going to unlock value. All of a sudden, there's lots of people not just talking about it, but building user bases, creating value. So it's super exciting times.
Awesome. It's sounding like a good spot to wrap the conversation up on. Thank you very much for joining us this week, Olly. It's been a fantastic conversation. I've certainly learned a lot, particularly on the open data side of things.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Where can we find you?
Yeah.
You can find me Twitter. I'm at Betts Olly, and LinkedIn Olly Betts with a Y. LinkedIn's probably where I hang out a bit more, so you can find me there.
Awesome.
Brilliant. Olly, thank you for joining us again. My previous hiccups, technically. So,
no problem. Cheers.
Try and enjoy the sun while it's here.
Yeah, hopefully it'll come out here as well in a bit. Yeah, have a good evening, guys.
You too.
Take care.
Bye.
See ya. Cheers.